Hello and welcome back to another GiantSlayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the ranked meta for patch 11.23. Initially, the meta was turned upside down by a quick hotfix patch aimed at nerfing both Katarina and Sion. While Sion definitely fell off, Katarina, on the other hand, has remained dominant. That leads us to the current meta, which has been going steady for over a week and is likely to remain similar moving forward as 11.23 is a 3-week patch. We'll be covering the meta items, augments, compositions, and look at each stage of the game. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Let's first discuss the opening carousel and meta items for patch 11.23. The best way to describe the current meta, which influences what items you may want to grab, is whether you're a Katarina player or not. If you play Katarina, then there's a specific list of items that you want. Those are Infinity Edge, Ionic Spark, Hand of Justice, or Hextech Gunblade. Thus, the components you want are any of Sword, Glove, or Rod, since they're all part of all of those items. But if you aren't a Katarina player, then you have a lot more options. That said, Bramble Vest is the most common item to make right now, considering assassins and most AD carries utilize Infinity Edge, so starting off with a Chain Vest is quite popular. Outside of that, what component you grab isn't as important. Sword is mainly used for Infinity Edge, but is also good for Shojin when playing AP carries or Giant Slayer to help deal with high health frontliners. Glove is usually contested because it's used to build Infinity Edge, Jeweled Gauntlet, Hand of Justice, and sometimes Last Whisper, though that does depend on the carry. Rod does have a lot of uses as well, but it's not as important as Sword or Glove, particularly because those other two components are necessary for Infinity Edge. But Rod is useful for quite a few meta items such as Ionic Spark, Gunblade, Jeweled Gauntlet, and Rageblade. Generally, Rod is primarily part of AP compositions, but Rageblade is a common carry item for a lot of comps. Then there's the defensive components of Chain Vest, Belt, and Cloak. Of the three, Chain Vest is the best because of the aforementioned Bramble Vest. Turns out negating critical strike damage is pretty good in a meta where Infinity Edge is doing well. Besides that, these components can be used for general catch-all defensive items like Warmogs, Dragon's Claw, and Sunfire Cape. Overall, defensive components are good for the early game and important later on for the main tank to survive. And finally, there's Tier. Tiers are used for Shojin, Blue Buff, and Hand of Justice. There's a few other niche items that Tier can build into, but those three are the primary ones. That means you can generally skip early Tier unless you specifically want to try and get a blue buff. All in all, the meta is a bit stale in regards to items and components because of a few dominating strategies. Infinity Edge and Bramble Vest are used in practically every comp, so if you want to default to a standard opener, aim for components that build into those two items. With items covered, let's move into the early game with Stage 1. There's not much in regards to Stage 1 that's worth analyzing too much, as it's all about picking pairs. The exception is committing to Katarina, which means making as much gold as possible. To do this, you want to play the minimum amount of units and still be able to win the PvE rounds. We don't recommend doing this unless you're quite comfortable with open forting, but playing 3 1-cost champions is plenty to win the early rounds if you want to open for Katarina. Make sure you scout during the early rounds to check what the mutant trait is for the game, as well as anyone that may have the Socialite Hex active. The real decision making is on the 1-4 augment, which in reality isn't that much of a decision. This is because there's almost always an obvious choice in regards to the 1-4 augment. Look for anything that provides you extra gold, experience, or immediate advantages like built different or item grab bag. Anything specific like emblems or trait buffs are usually bait because there's no guarantee that you'll end up making use of those augments later on. Even though the augment choice is usually obvious, we recommend using the extra time to scout out other players before committing to a particular augment. It's unlikely the decision will change, but extra information is always helpful. Let's move into Stage 2, where the decision needs to be made, to Katarina or not to Katarina. Even though Katarina is strong, it's worth noting that you're not guaranteed to win or even top 4 with it, especially if any player is contesting, as that lowers the chances of doing well. As such, we recommend only playing Katarina under 2 conditions. 1, you have a good opener for it and you're comfortable with playing below half health in the mid game. Good openers generally mean any augment that gives you extra gold like Windfall or Rich Get Richer, and have good components for Katarina. Second, scout to see if anyone looks to be open forting. Open forting meaning you're playing no champions or an extremely weak board with the intent to go on a loss streak. If it looks like anyone else is doing this, you need to decide whether committing is worth it or not. There are other builds you can go off of an open forward, such as reroll Kog'Maw, Trundle, or Warwick, but by far the best is Katarina. If you're not looking to open fort, then your goal is to win streak, so push levels on 2-1 and 2-5. Look for strong opening boards like Scrap Innovator, Twisted Fate Darius, and specific champions like Vex. Try to make at least one item, as that always adds a decent amount of strength to your board. The rest of Stage 2 is either continuing to go on a loss streak or trying to win streak. Keep in mind on Krugs if you're either above 50 gold or won't make 50 to level to ensure that you win the round. Next up is the mid game in Stage 3. Here's where the reroll players will begin to do their thing. For the majority, the goal is level 6, though some like Garen Kog'Maw can start at level 5. The plan for anyone reroll is first scout. See if anyone is contesting and what the general state of everyone's board is. Getting a general feel for how strong or weak the lobby is good for learning how much time you have to roll before you need to all in your gold. The next step is, of course, rolling. Roll down to 50 each round and buy the necessary champions if they pop up. There's a lot of luck involved here, so sometimes you will hit quickly and other times you won't, such as the variance of being a reroller. Everyone else in the lobby should be aiming to level 6 on 3-2, though anyone on a win streak going into Stage 3 can level on 3-1 to try to preserve their streak. While being high on health is ideal, it's important to push levels primarily for a higher chance at 4-cost champions and to punish the weaker players in the lobby. Reroll compositions are on a timer, but so is everyone else, as once those players hit their power spike, the damage taken per round goes up dramatically. Roll if you need to at level 6, but unless you've been hard losing every round, Stage 3 should be a breeze for non-reroll players. On to the 3-3 augment. Gold and experience augments are still decent here, but generally not as good compared to buffs or passive benefits like items, components, or boosts to your board like new recruit. The value of gaining gold does depend on your board state and economy, but for example, taking rich get richer is not as valuable on 3-3 as it is on 1-4. Specific emblem, heart, or soul augments do play more of a role at this point of the game since compositions are beginning to formulate. It is still a risk, especially since most of these augments don't provide immediate bonuses, but some are useful like Socialite or synergies that you want to hit a higher tier of right away, like Mutant. Overall, look for augments that provide benefits to your composition like buffs or passives. And of course, scout on this round and after to see what augments the other players took. Into Stage 4 we go, where everyone but the rerollers will be leveling to 7. Here's where you want to roll a decent amount of gold, though saving enough to keep a healthy economy is important as you want to hit level 8 between 4-5 and 5-3. Rolling on 7 is basically to grab the 4 cost to try to stabilize your board, especially since reroll comps will usually hit their stride in Stage 4. Before we talk about the Stage 4 augment, let's cover a few of the meta comps. As we've mentioned multiple times, there's plenty of reroll builds floating around in the meta. Katarina is the most common, which rerolls for Katarina 3 and plays 3 additional assassins plus Leona and Blitzcrank. It's a strong comp when uncontested and probably the easiest in the meta for climbing ranked. Other reroll compositions include Garen Kog'Maw, Trundle Vi, Warwick Quinn, and depending on the mutation, Malzahar Mutant Arcanist. The general goal is the same for all of these. Roll until you hit a few 3-star champions, then begin leveling. None of them are quite as strong as Katarina, but rerolling is inherently high in variance, so someone hitting an early Warwick 3, for example, will be in a better position than someone stuck on Katarina 2. Other compositions in the meta are Arcanists, Innovators, Mutants, Chemtech Bruiser, and occasionally niche carries like Orianna or Jhin. Late game champions still do well, like Jace and Jinx, but the pace of the game is quite fast, so hitting 2-star 5-cost units is difficult. Overall, most of the non-reroll compositions are playable at level 7 in Stage 4, but some, like Innovators or Chemtech, are better at level 8 since they use more high-cost champions. And that leads us to the final 4-6 augment. There's a lot of options at this stage of the game, but the general rule of thumb is to grab any augment that boosts your current composition. Emblems can be quite useful for opening up options on your board, same with heart and soul augments. Experience augments at this point of the game are rarely that useful, same for anything that gives you extra gold. That said, if you are behind, getting Windfall or Level Up can provide a way to make a comeback. In general though, look for any augment that provides the most benefit to your current comp. Lacking in damage with Yone? Knife's Edge can be great. Missing out on healing? Celestial Blessing is fantastic. Playing Arcanists? Take the Runic Shield. It's all dependent on your current board and the state of the game, but in general, the choice isn't too difficult. And with that, we can move into the late game. The late game is all about hitting level 8, stabilizing your board, and scouting. Positioning is hugely impactful at this stage of the game, and is what you should be spending the majority of your focus on improving. How exactly to do that is dependent a lot on your current lobby, your board, and position in the game. There's no quick trick to improving at scouting and positioning, it's all about playing and learning from past experiences. That said, if you're the type of player looking to play a certain composition often, then look for a streamer that plays it and actively watch how they position their boards. Watching high-ranked players is a great way to pick up on ways to improve at the game. As for level 9 and late game champions, those are ultimately the goal for a lot of compositions, but as we mentioned, the pace of the meta is quite quick. Getting to level 9 is unlikely for the majority of players, as rolling to stabilize will often save you more health in the long run for a better placement. 5-cost champions are quite good, but look for ones that either fit your specific composition, like Victor with Arcanus, or are in general useful, like Yumi or Tahm Kench. Don't get caught up too much on having to hit level 9, as most games are over early into stage 6. That's all for today's video, folks. The meta definitely heavily favors forcing compositions more so than flexible play, which is quite the contrast to patch 11.22. If you're a fan of rerolling, then this is probably the perfect patch for you. Keep in mind there's an extra week of 11.23, as patch 11.24 won't be out until December 8th. Let us know in the comments section below which reroll composition is your favorite in the current meta. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.